Now, what we want to look at is really the factors in gaining and losing weight, because depending on what the person needs to do, whether it is gain or loses weight, there are various factors that are going to come into play to help that individual be successful at either gaining or losing weight. Really, the key to gaining or losing weight is really just about energy intake versus energy expenditure. So how many calories are we bringing in versus the calories we're burning in our essentially our everyday life activities as well as our physical activities. So whether it's gain or loses weight, the real strategy to weight management is balancing the energy intake and the energy expenditure, and just making sure that you're getting appropriate amounts of calories in and burning appropriate amount of calories to have successful weight management techniques. A couple other factors as well that we'll look at: genetic factors. Genetics obviously play a role in many aspects of the human body, and it's the same goes for gaining and losing weight as well. Childhood factors, especially when we look at uh, children who are overweight, definitely have a harder time overcoming that as they move into adulthood, and that plays a role in their gaining and their ability to lose weight. We also see some behavioral factors as well that play a big role in gaining and losing weight. And we'll go over those behavioral factors as well as those different social factors. So that's what we're going to sort of focus on when we look at weight management and how to gain and how to lose weight. And then we'll talk about really the numbers and the calories, so we know exactly sort of how to plan your diet to make sure that you are successful with the weight gain or the weight loss. So, as I said, the key is really energy balance, and energy balance is just all about the food that we eat versus the calories we burn. So, when we're talking about energy intake, we're talking about the calories from food that we ingest, and those calories come from carbohydrates, fats, and protein. Um, each and every one of the calories that we consume, they have specific uh, metabolic metabolic strategies to help the body either go through any sort of anabolic or catabolic reaction when it comes to metabolism. And what we need to look at with those calories is things like carbohydrates want to produce energy at a high intensity, fat wants to produce energy while at rest, and protein wants to build up the muscle. But the real key, all three of those nutrients, if there is an abundance of them and there is no need for them to produce energy or build muscle um, or store as glycogen, then what they will do is store as fat and increase our weight with fat. And then energy expenditure is really the energy expended at rest as well as during physical activity, and it's really about the amount of calories we're burning. So it's about the energy we're creating and how much energy are we creating in order to take those nutrients in their simplistic form after digestion and create ATP. And the more ATP we create, the more calories we burn, which is going to help with decreasing weight. And there are some factors when it comes to increasing weight, because obviously when we go through a weight gain program, it's muscle we want to focus on gaining, not fat. So when it comes to weight loss, what we want to make sure we do is have a less amount of food and expend a higher amount of energy. So with weight loss, it's all about making sure that the energy intake is less than the energy expenditure. So that's really the key to weight management when it comes to weight loss. And what we're trying to do is lose actually a very small amount of weight, because we can't. It's actually unhealthy to lose a large amount of weight in a short period of time. So ideally, what we look at with weight loss is healthy weight loss is about 1 to 2 pounds per week. So obviously, depending on your size and how much weight you have, will be really dependent on how much weight you want to lose per week. So if you're looking at losing 10 pounds total, ideally you'd want to do it in about a 10-week period and having about 1 pound per week. And the general guideline for losing fat is 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat. So ideally what we want to do is burn that 3,500 calories throughout the week to burn the 1 pound of fat. And that's really all about just consuming a small amount of food and expending a high amount of energy. And really, if you're doing 1 pound of fat per week, it's not that substantial. It's not that overly difficult, because it's really small changes. So if you just need to decrease 3,500 calories per week, which is 500 calories a day, to make small changes, all you would need to do is consume 2,500 calories less and burn, or sorry, not 2,500, 250 calories less, and expend 250 calories more than you were previously, and that will help you decrease a pound a week by burning 3,500 calories per week. Now with weight gain, because weight gain is obviously something we want to be able to do as well and understand how we want to do. And weight gain is just all about consuming a large amount of food and expending a small amount of energy. So our energy intake has to be greater than energy expenditure in order for weight gain to happen. Now, for the most part, you may have some people who need to gain fat because they're underweight and they don't have enough fat. But most people who want to weight gain, they want to do it through physical activity, specifically resistance training. So if you're just trying to gain weight to get a healthy amount of fat, then it would be the same as the losing weight. 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat. So you would just be increasing your caloric intake by 3,500 calories a week, or 500 calories per day. And then if you want to gain muscle, we look at 2,500 calories equals 1 pound of lean muscle. So you would want to increase, and similar to losing weight, the healthy range for gaining weight is about 1 to 2 pounds per week. So you'd want to increase by 2,500 to 5,000 calories per week, which would be actually increasing your food intake by a considerable amount. So the one thing with weight gain, especially when we're looking at weight gain with muscle, is our food consumption is actually going to increase, because not only do we have to increase the amount of food that we're eating, so up to 2,500 to 5,000 calories per week, but we also have to take into account that we're going to be physically exerting within resistance training principles in order to help break down the muscles and build them up and gain the weight. So that's going to increase the amount of energy expended as well, which then again is going to increase the amount of food that we have to consume. So when we look at weight gain, it's actually a little bit more difficult than weight loss, because you're looking at potentially increasing your daily caloric count to 3,000 to 3,500 calories, maybe even 4,000 calories, depending on your metabolism. So it ends up being a considerable amount of food that you need to intake for weight gain, especially weight gain with muscle. And then if we're looking at just maintaining current weight, then all we need to make sure we do is just make sure our energy intake equals that of the energy expenditure, right? So most of us, and most people that you may come across or may work with in the future, weight management or weight maintenance is probably going to be what most people want. It's just to maintain current weight, because for most people it's about health, and once they get into sort of the healthy weight, they just want to maintain that. They don't want to look at losing a lot of weight all the time and gaining a lot of weight. They just want to maintain the weight, and they may not be interested in gaining weight on top of what they have, even with it. If it's the muscle, they just may not be interested in gaining any muscle. So most people, it's weight management we want to look at. Now, there's three components for energy balance. So the three components that we look at, that what takes place or what burns calories, is our basal metabolic rate, our thermic effect of food, and our energy cost of physical activity. So our basal metabolic rate essentially is our metabolism. Our thermic effect of food essentially is when the food digests and then goes through its anabolic state or its anabolic breakdown, will require energy. So it's going to require calories as well, and will burn a small amount of calories. And then, of course, energy cost of physical activity, which is just the amount we burn throughout the day of our with our activity. So BMR, or basal metabolic rate, which essentially is just our metabolism, or known as basal metabolism, it's really going to be the highest energy expended for each individual, because it's what we use or what we do to maintain basal rates or resting functions of the body. So it's not included. Physical activity is not included on this. It is essentially just the bare minimum of calories we need to sustain life. And BMR is considered metabolism. So you've probably heard of people who have high metabolisms or low metabolisms. But generally, what that means is people who have leaner tissue will have a higher metabolism or a higher basal metabolic rate. And then as we age, our BMR decreases, and that poses issues, because that's how some people become overweight or even obese, is because what happens is their BMR decreases as they age, and their physical activity decreases with age, and their food or their eating habit stays the same, and we end up eating too many calories and not expending enough, and then we get into weight gain. So the most accurate way to determine your energy needs is with this easy calculation. So the BMR calculation is your BMR equals your weight in kilograms times 1 times 24 for men, and your BMR equals weight in kilograms times 0.9 times 24 for women. So this is that simplistic calculation is just going to give you what your basic metabolism is, or your basic basal metabolic rate is. So essentially how many calories you need to sustain resting functions. All right. So for most people, it's probably going to be around 1,000 or 1,200. And then you need to add on top of that the extra energy that you are going to need to maintain any type of activity level that you have. So anything on top of your BMR. And that ranges from anywhere from 25% for people who are sedentary to 100% to people who are very active. So generally, the BMR does not just cover sedentary lifestyle. We do need to add a few extra calories onto people for sedentary lifestyle as well, because BMR is just the resting state. And then people who are very active or have very active jobs, or just have physically active lifestyles, have to incorporate anywhere from essentially 50 to 100% more or on top of that. But generally what you'd want to do is, and how I sort of do it is, I take my BMR, I add the 25% as sedentary, and then I essentially just add any type of physical activity that I do in the day, and then it just sort of come up with a total that way. And then that way it gives me a little bit more of a clearer picture of what exactly my calorie consumption for the day would be with my BMR, my low level activity, and then my physical activity. Now, the two other aspects is that thermic effect of food, as I said. So energy expended to process food. So as we eat food and it digests and it absorbs into the bloodstream, and the nutrients change from carbohydrates to glucose, or fat to triglycerides, or protein to amino acids. It goes through anabolic as well as catabolic reactions. And those anabolic and catabolic reactions, which are an aspect of metabolism, will need energy for them to take place. So digestion essentially needs energy, which would then increase your calorie consumption. All right, but it's really tough to tell exactly what the number would be. So we can't really quantify the thermic effect of food when it comes to how many calories are burnt. But the one we can is energy expended in physical activity. So any sort of energy costs that we have when we are moving or exercising above our basal rate or our resting rate, and then based on our body weight or body size, our intensity of exercise, and how long the activity is performed, it will give us an idea of how many calories we burn. And it's going to be an estimate to how many calories we burn, but it still will give us a pretty good idea, especially if we use heart rate. If we can have our accurate weight and then our accurate heart rate readings, then we will get a pretty good glimpse of how many calories we burn within that physical activity state. So that's why working out with a heart rate monitor is important, because we can come up with how many calories we burn in that exercise session, because our heart rate will be monitored the entire time. Now, what I want to talk about now is just those various factors that play into why people may have a hard time really losing weight. This more comes down to losing weight. And childhood factors is sort of the first thing we look at. So if you ever go to see a dietitian, one of the first things they may ask you is sort of what your food choices, what activity levels you had in childhood, because that could factor in on a lot of aspects with your later adult behavior, especially with things like food choices, weight loss or weight gain, and a lot of the times it will really determine how successful people can be. So some dietitians, nutritionists may sort of explore your childhood when it comes to nutrition. And obviously, with the epidemic we're facing right now with childhood obesity and childhood overweightness, it's really causing a problem, because obviously when those kids become adults, they're already starting off adulthood overweight, and that's a challenge, because for them it's really, they obviously have not had proper nutrition or proper physical activity, so it's something they need to completely learn from scratch before they can start having effective weight loss strategies and physical activity strategies. And one of the big problems is obviously when we're overweight, it increases the risk of disease as well as premature death. And for a child who's overweight, that is going to essentially cut their life short, because they're going to be already having high cholesterol levels once they get into their early 20s, and even potential plaque buildup in their arteries, because they've had high amounts of fat and high amounts of cholesterol in their system for really their entire life. And that's why we see childhood obesity and overweight children as being a real issue and a real problem, and we need to start educating parents, and we need to start educating more elementary school teachers, high school teachers, on how we can effectively teach children to be more physically active and have better nutritional options. So behavioral factors when it comes to things like food choices and the composition of a person's diet and whether it's balanced or not, could be based on physiological and psychological aspect of eating. And that's hunger versus appetite. So hunger is physiological and appetite is psychological. So when we look at hunger, the physiological aspect of hunger essentially is when we're hungry, we get a signal, and we feel that signal, which is hunger in our stomach, and we start eating, and that will subside the hunger, and we'll move on. It's basic survival technique when it comes to physiology of the body. Now, appetite, which is psychological, and it's the psychological desire to eat, and appetite is what tends to cause people to overeat. And appetite tends to be the when we eat when we're bored, or we eat when we're sad, or we eat for comfort, or whatever it is, right? So appetite tends to be the times when we eat even though we don't really need to. And there's an interesting research study done about appetite, and what they did is they took a large group of people and they put them into a movie theater, and they gave everybody at the movie theater a large bag of popcorn to watch the movie and eat. And half of the subjects were required to eat with their non-dominant hand, and the other half of the subjects were required to eat with their dominant hand. And what they found in this study was the group that ate with the non-dominant hand ate less than the group with the dominant hand. And the reason they felt that was because of the psychological, not so much the psychological desire to eat, but really sort of the unconscious desire to eat that we have as well, which is involved with appetite. So the people who are eating with their non-dominant hand, they were thinking more about the food because it wasn't natural. It wasn't a natural movement for them to pick the popcorn up and put it in their mouth with the non-dominant hand. So they actually consciously were thinking about the amount of food that they put in their mouth, and really sort of controlled themselves, where the dominant hand people all ate the entire popcorn bag. And the reason why they hypothesized that was because it was something that's so natural that they didn't even think about it. They were just essentially shoveling popcorn in their mouth without even thinking about it, right? And that's what can happen with appetite, is we have sometimes this psychological desire to eat, or sometimes we just have food and we don't even think about it. We're just eating it. All right. And it always tends to be the snack foods, or the foods that are bad for us, that we eat that way. So I thought that was kind of an interesting study when it came to appetite, and really our psychological aspect of eating, and how it could be an unconscious aspect, or an unconscious thing. Now, social influences that influence our diet are things like our family or cultural traditions, any sort of holiday celebrations. We always seem to eat, a large amount of foods when we get together with friends and families, and other cultural traditions, or they fast at certain times of the year, which obviously would affect nutrition and food choices. Other social factors is our easy access to high-fat foods, which we've talked about before, as well as less physically active lifestyle, but also the expectations of the perfect body, and the media's role of bombarding us with what we should look like, or what people want to look like, and creating potential psychological eating disorders because of that. So there are some social factors that do play important roles when it comes to weight loss, mainly. Now, what I would like to look at now is just how do we achieve or maintain a healthy body weight. So a couple things to note when it comes to a healthy body weight, and anytime that changes are needed to either achieve a healthy body weight or maintain a healthy body weight. For the most part, it'd be achieving healthy body weight if a change is required. The first thing you want to do is a gradual change. You never want to make a huge change to anything that we've discussed that with behavioral modification, but it's especially important with nutrition, because obviously we have our physiological hunger as well as our psychological desire to eat with our appetite. But anytime we do any sort of really large changes right off the bat, that's when we kind of increase things like cravings, and then we tend to maybe fail a little bit because we're depriving ourselves of the food that we may like or that we may want, trying to lose weight. And then what happens is we end up craving it, and then we just end up eating it as well. Or some people with cravings, what they'll do is they'll get a craving, and then they'll be like, okay, I'm going to curb the craving. I'm going to eat. I'm going to eat something to try and something else. Maybe I'm just hungry. It's not so much craving. I'm just hungry. And then so they eat a bunch of food to try and not eat the bad food or whatever it is they're craving. And then so they eat a bunch of food, and then they end up just eating what they craved originally anyway. So they've increased their total calorie count because they tried to curb the craving with food, and then they just ended up eating the craving as well. So it's best to do gradual changes. That's why for most people I always suggest, if you want to lose some weight, lose 1 pound per week. Try and make that 1 pound per week goal, and cut 250 calories out of your diet, and start burning 250 calories extra than you were before. And then that's 500 calories a day, and that would lead to potentially 1 pound per week. Obviously, regular and appropriate physical exercise will also help with our healthy body changes. And if it is a major change and it becomes a behavioral change or a habit change, then we have to make sure that we follow or apply our behavioral modification techniques in order to help assist us to make sure that we make the everlasting change moving forward, so it does become a habit and we go into that maintenance phase. So when it comes to losing weight or planning to lose weight, there's a couple things that we can do, small changes we can do in order to effectively lose that weight. So obviously knowing our 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat is the first thing to do. And then you can start doing simple things like following recommended serving sizes for your age group or your weight. So all nutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, sugars within carbohydrates, saturated fats within fats, all have recommended daily allowances or recommended daily limits. And if you follow those recommendations and use nutritional facts, and when we get into nutrition, we'll go over how to read nutritional facts and ingredients to see if your choice is a healthy choice or not. So if you can follow the recommended serving sizes as well as use nutritional labels, you can really help yourself improve your diet and make the small changes that you need to do to help lose weight. Another thing you can do is just reduce intake of high fat and high energy foods. So if you notice that you're eating a lot of high fat or high energy foods, which are also called empty calories, cut a few of those out. And again, small change, and it could make a huge difference. When you look at something like milk, for example, so if you're used to drinking 2% milk, and you have 1 glass of 2% milk a day, if you were to switch to skim milk, so then instead of having 1 cup of 2% milk a day, you have 1 cup of skim milk per day. Over an entire year, you would lose 10 pounds. All right, so you would cut 10 pounds of fat out of your diet just by switching from 2% to skim, right? So there's just a small, change by cutting out a high fat option. And then obviously regular physical exercise is really going to be the key point to effective weight loss. You can lose weight just through diet, just by cutting calories and losing that weight that way. But physical activity is going to do things like obviously increase the amount of energy that you expend in the day, but it's also going to help increase BMR. So it's going to increase your metabolism, which is going to actually raise your calorie count total. So for some people, just by exercising, they can eat the way they've been eating, but just adding exercise into their lifestyle will help them lose weight. Also, exercise is going to help with reducing the amount of stretch marks that take place when you have excess weight and you start losing weight. So it helps reduce that as well. So there's lots of benefits to weight loss and regular physical exercise. Now, another thing I want to sort of note is about weight loss medications and supplements, weight loss supplements. I don't know how popular these are now, but 5-10 years ago, there was quite a bit of weight loss medications and herbal supplements to help people lose weight. And the big problem with that is the side effects that come along with it. And the example I have up here is this hydroxycut. And if you weren't sure what hydroxycut is, they still have it on the market now, but it's a little bit changed than it was, I think it was like 10 years ago. Hydroxycut used to have ephedrine in it. And what ephedrine is a stimulant. And so what these medications or supplements essentially do is they increase your basal metabolic rate. So they increase your metabolism by stimulating your body to have a higher heart rate. And you effectively burn more calories throughout the day because your heart rate's elevated for the entire day. Now, that's obviously going to be problematic because you're asking your heart to work above resting for a long period of time. So a lot of these weight loss supplements, weight loss medications have been removed from the market because there was lots of dangerous side effects. And one of them with ephedrine is cardiac failure and potentially death. And a lot of athletes actually were using ephedrine, and a couple football players about 10 years ago was using ephedrine and during practice, and it was hot, and they ended up actually dying because it was too much stimulation in the heat, and the cardiovascular system just couldn't handle it. So those supplements, you got to be very careful because obviously if it's a stimulant, you're just increasing your stress on your heart. There's some doctors who may prescribe people who are obese with medications in order to help lose weight, but ideally we want to lose weight through diet and exercise. That is the best method and the most healthy method for the individual. Now, effective weight gain is important as well as understanding and noting effective weight gain. So if you want to gain a pound of fat, that's probably the easiest and most fun thing to do. All you got to do is eat 500 to 1,000 extra calories per day. And in a week, you probably will gain 1 pound of fat. If you want to gain a pound of muscle, though, it's a little bit more difficult because it's 2,500 extra calories as well as the extra energy expenditure to resistance training. And the only way to gain muscle weight is by incorporating resistance training into your routine. So you actually end up having to eat more than 500 to 1,000 calories a day for muscle. It's almost 1,000 to potentially 2,000 calories per day, depending on how much weight training you're doing. And in order to do that, it's most ideal to eat frequently throughout the day. So instead of just having, 3 or 4 large meals, sometimes it's better to eat 5 or 6 meals throughout the day, or smaller meals, or 4 smaller meals with 2 snacks in between certain meals, and just making sure that you're getting enough calories and you're getting enough protein and you're getting enough carbohydrates. So balancing your diet But you also want to limit fat intake to 15 to 30% of total energy to intake. And if it's lean muscle you're trying to gain, you probably want to be closer to the 15 to 20% with the fat intake. Another thing you want to do is make sure you avoid tobacco products, because tobacco products will increase your BMR as well as depress appetite. So if you're trying to gain weight and you're a smoker, you're going to have a little bit more of a challenge because your appetite's going to be a little bit depressed from it, and you're also going to have a higher metabolism because your heart, the nicotine is just going to make your heart work a little extra harder. And then, of course, resistance training and making sure you go through a proper periodized plan with proper hypertrophy principles involved. That's what we want to make sure we follow when it comes to effective weight gain. Now, what I want to sort of end off the weight management lecture with is looking at obesity and just sort of a little bit of a, just give you guys an idea of what exactly is happening with obesity. So most people most people who are obese, they get it through what's called creeping obesity. And what creeping obesity is just the primary factor associated with an increase in body fat. Because with age, we get a progressive decrease in BMR or metabolism. So our basal metabolic rate is going to be highly dependent on age, but also as well as amount of lean body mass that the individual has. And then with age, a person's lean body mass will decrease, and therefore so does the BMR. So exercise is obviously one way of maintaining lean body mass and keeping our BMR elevated. And so physical activity usually decreases with age as well. And so that is another decrease in creeping obesity that we see. So what essentially happens with creeping obesity is we get to a certain point, we get into our mid-20s, and everything's sort of in line, all right? We have a high basal metabolic rate, we have high physical activity, and we have high, and then our eating habits match that. So through our 20s, we generally look at being able to maintain that weight. And then we get into our 30s, and we start seeing that we have more responsibilities. We become a little busier and our physical activity starts decreasing, and then we don't have quite the lean body mass that we had, and then that would mean our basal metabolism drops. But our eating habits don't drop that much. And then this cycle just continues into our 40s, into our 50s, and then when we get into our 60s, now we are overweight or obese. So we get this increase in body fatness. So what we're actually seeing now, especially with the epidemic of obesity in childhood, is the 20s isn't quite what it used to be. It's not like everyone has this nice even weight, this maintained weight here. People in their 20s, they're overweight already, and then they start getting to the creeping obesity, even already being overweight, and then by the time they're 30, maybe 40, they're obese. And then what happens is their life expectancy decreases, and they would be lucky if they could get to their 60s in that case. So one reason why childhood obesity is a concern, but also one reason we need to make sure that our eating habits are in line with our physical activity and our BMR. So if we can, throughout our age, keep this level throughout, then we won't have to worry about weight, and we'll be more in the weight maintenance stage. Now, I just want to show a couple things, a couple stats when it comes to obesity. One in the USA, and then we'll look at one in Canada. Now, this is just the percentage of obesity in the USA based on states. And what we see is Mississippi and West Virginia are the two highest, while Colorado, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Hawaii have the least amount of obese people. But what we see is the southern and the eastern states here tend to be the higher rates of obesity. And one of the reasons that is because of the food they eat. Southern food is very rich, very fatty food, and also portions tend to be very high. So we see the eastern states of America being having very high rates of obesity, and the rest of the country have moderate level, but still a little bit too much. Now, one thing we do need to look at though is this research or the stats are done by percentage of obese based on BMI. So, as we looked at last day, we these are going to be a little bit skewed because obviously it's taking into account that the people with muscle mass are obese, and so that is going to skew these results a little bit. But if you've ever been to the southern United States, you probably will notice that there is a lot of overweight and obese people in that area. Now in Canada, we see really sort of the more isolated areas being higher, and the more sort of like Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, sort of the more metropolis areas of Canada tend to be a little bit lower, right? So usually we do see that with the in Canada is the isolated areas where there's snow 6 to 8 months of the year. You're stuck inside a lot, not exercising that much. That tends to be higher. But another thing we need to look at again is this is based on body mass index. So that is going to play a role in, what these results are really like. All right. But we definitely do have an epidemic when it comes to childhood obesity in Canada as well as in the United States. So when we look at Canada, since 1970, the obesity prevalence has, for preschool children, doubled. So we're looking at overweight and obesity numbers in age 2 to 5 years. So 2 to 5 year olds, so essentially preschoolers, toddlers, the obesity numbers have doubled. It's unbelievable to think. Adolescents doubled as well. Children 6 to 11, it's tripled. We're seeing more than 9 million children and youth over 6 years of age are obese or overweight in Canada. 9 million children. Now, that's setting up for a lot of issues, a lot of economic issues in our country, a lot of health issues in our country, and it's something that needs to change. And in the States, the trends are very similar. So it's a sad state to see, children 6 years or older overweight and obese. Now, the economic costs that we've seen, now these are the earliest numbers I've been able to find. In Canada, the cost went from obesity-associated annual hospital costs for children and youth increased from $35 million to $127 million in essentially 20 years. So in 81, it was around 35 million, and in 1999 it was 127 million. So in almost 20 years we saw almost 4 times the amount of annual hospital costs for obesity related with children. So now I don't know, like, it's 2017 now, so I'm sure those numbers have increased more. So we're probably looking at 300 million. In the States, you're looking at it in 2004, it was 129 billion annually. Again, that's 2004. What are those numbers like now? It could be 250 to 300 billion dollars of expenditures related to obesity and overweight with adults. That is, though, not children. So those are staggering numbers, and obviously when we look at obesity and we look at overweight, it has to change, and it has to start with children, I think, personally. And that means it has to start with parents. And parents have to understand more that the food that they put, or the food that they give their children, needs to be healthy. And they need to understand and they need to get it. And they just, right now, don't. Not enough do. All right. There's obviously some parents that get it and they, help their children out and they teach them how to eat, but the majority clearly don't. And there needs to be more funding, more programming, more education to help those parents understand that, McDonald's isn't the best choice for lunch every day. Um, they have to understand that yes, healthier food can be more expensive, but you can still budget and still eat healthy. There's still ways to do it. And the more education that there is, the better. And if you're sort of looking at what type of career could I do in kinesiology, there's definitely a lot of money potentially out there for someone who wants to work with children and teach them how to move properly and work with parents to educate them on how to feed their children properly. There's not a lot of people out there who are doing it right now, and it's something that you could easily get yourself contracted to in elementary schools to teach kids how to move more, teach them how to play and how to be physically active, and then educate the parents with some sort of seminars on the nutrition that their kids need. All right, so thanks very much for listening. So that was weight management. Weight management is chapter 5 in the textbook, just to let you know. So those last two lectures were chapter 4 and chapter 5. We're going to be moving into nutrition next week, and that's going to be chapter 3. I hope everybody has a great day, and we will talk to you